I love it. I'm the co-founder of A Mighty Blaze, the book initiative that was begun during the pandemic to help authors, independent bookstores, and also readers. Today we have Kelly Weill with Off the Edge, Flat Earthers, Conspiracy Culture, and Why People Will Believe Anything. And it's remarkable. I just about devoured this book, and it really pertains to everything that's going on right now. So Kelly Weill is a journalist at the Daily Beast. She's also a leading voice on online conspiracy theories, and she's discussed all of this on ABC, Nightline, CNN, and more. I'm thrilled that you're here, Kelly. The book is it's incredible. I've been telling everybody about it. So thank you for being here.
No, thank you so much for having me.
So I want to start talking about how you came to write this. As you say in the book that you started to write this almost as, because it seemed like it might have been fun for you. But as the years have gone on with Trump and QAnon and everything else, it's taken on a dangerous edge. So I want you to define this first for our audience. Explain to us basically what flat Earth theory is.
Mm-hmm. So flat Earth theory in some ways is just what it sounds like. The believers think we live on a flat plane, a circular one, almost like a Frisbee. And then there are some variations in the theory, but most of them think that the flat Earth is surrounded by an ice wall and then contained underneath a dome like a big snow globe.
But there are others who also think that it goes on forever, right? There's another segment.
There are people who say infinite until proven otherwise. There have been alternate models where people believed there were different flat Earths stacked above and below, but largely today they kind of go for that snow globe model.
But it's been since Aristotle where we've known that the Earth is a globe. What would make people suddenly feel that that's untrue, that it's flat?
I think people have had certain motivations over the years to turn their backs on what seems like a very obvious model that we live on a globe. It's quite easy to prove. And where I start this book historically is in the 1840s, which I locate as the beginning of the modern flat Earth movement. And that's when we had this English eccentric named Samuel Rowbotham, who he was the leader of a failed utopian commune. He sold fake miracle cures for a while. And then he started promoting these bogus experiments claiming that Earth was flat based on his own observations. And he wrote books about this. He did a lecture tour. And, it's funny because flat Earth was just as ridiculous then as it is now. But there were reasons for people to latch onto that theory at the time. And one was that this theory was coming out in a moment of emerging sciences. There was new emphasis on natural sciences like evolution, and people could feel as though religion was taking a back seat in the world. So a theory like flat Earth that didn't just say that science was wrong, but that science was nefariously wrong, was trying to hide the truth from you, that was useful in a moment like this. It was a good tool for rejection.
You also say, which I thought was really interesting too, that to the 19th and 20th centuries, flat earthism was primarily motivated by biblical literalism. Sorry, I mispronounced that. And that believers saw the globe and astronomy as threats to faith. To me, that's it's weird how the two merge, and yet it makes sense. But it's the same kind of almost dogmatic belief in that everything in the Bible is true, and therefore you cannot go against it. I was wondering if you think, how you see those two groups intersecting, people who are really religious and people who are flat earthers. Are there any flat earthers who are not religious?
I saw a poll in a flat Earth Facebook group a few years ago asking people their religious beliefs, and there was just a tiny margin of people answering that they were not religious. But by and large, it is a very religious movement, not because the claims are especially religious in nature, but because they are sympathetic, I think, to people who want to have a very biblically literal view of the world.
Mhm.
And I didn't fully understand why that was so, those two views were so compatible until I heard one woman put it this way at a flat earth conference. And she said that before she found flat earth, she was a little frightened of the idea that outer space was infinite and vast and that we were this little point in this huge universe. And when she converted to flat earth theory, which usually says that the universe is contained under the dome, it's a very small
Oh my
universe,
God.
she felt, yes, she felt seen and
Right.
part
And
of
safe.
a more cohesive system. And, although that to me is a ludicrous argument, there's a little bit of sense to it. I can understand why she would want to feel as if she had a more defined place.
You know, the way you've spoken about a lot of the flat earthers you spoke to and other conspiracists, I was wondering if you ever, for even a second, surrounded by all this, wavered and saw the appeal. Because a lot of the flat earth people in the book talk about how, well, I don't believe it. And then I saw, I
Mhm.
started watching these videos and I saw, oh my God, it's right. Of course it's right. Did you ever for a second feel the pull?
I can't say that I did, partly because it's such a strange theory,
I
but
know.
I can see how others would see the pull. And a lot of that comes from the way that they construct their arguments. They don't argue so much from a place of information, of having strong claims, as they do of trying to poke holes in your model. So I've had flat earthers,
Right.
yeah, just throw random trivia at me. How fast are we going around the sun? Well, I don't know that. I don't memorize that. And they say, "Aha, you don't know."
Oh,
And
oh,
I
that's
said, "Well, I
brilliant.
guess I don't. I know." And so that weird kind of inversion of the scientific method actually, or it makes it sound like you're the dogmatic one, right? You're the one who's going on blind
Right.
faith. And although I can very easily in the internet age just look up how fast we're orbiting the sun and that solves the problem, in that moment, I can understand how that is a compelling argument for some people.
Were these flat earthers ever hostile to you, or did they think that you could publicize their cause? Did they realize who you were, what you were doing? And if they did know you were a journalist, what was their reasons for talking to you?
Mhm. I've always been very upfront in reporting this book and doing journalism day to day on this movement that I am a journalist and that I believe Earth is round. And that said, I'm
Oh,
still interested
God.
in talking to them. And what's funny is although I have certainly met some hostility from people, and I tend to, if someone says, go away, we don't want to talk to you, I respect that. But by and large, I've found that people are willing to talk to me. And part of that, I think, is because I've been around the movement for a little while and people, get tired of me, or at least know who I am. Um, but I've found that after a few moments of trying to convince me of their theory, that people want to open up and talk about other things happening in their lives. So we'll spend a few token moments, and they'll try and tell me something about the horizon lines, and then they'll start telling me about emotional reasons they've come to this theory, and what it provides for them, or what they've lost in having devoted their lives to conspiracy theories. And I think people talk to me because I am willing to listen, and so it's I've had, I think, decent conversations with people, and I hope they feel the same.
I want to talk about, I mean, there are many, many characters in this book who are just wild. And I want to talk about two of them. One of the most fascinating is Mike Hughes, who wanted to prove that the earth was flat by making a rocket launcher he built to see the flat earth with his own eyes. Um, he died in the experiment. And later, what was so interesting is you were talking about how you liked him. You felt he was kind and serious until you heard from his PR person who said, oh, it was all a PR stunt.
Mhm.
Um, I was just really curious about, since you've written this book already, what are your feelings about Mike Hughes now? And why would people say, a lot of these flat earthers say, well, if you try to go and see with your own eyes whether this is true or not, there can be collateral damage. Why don't they
Mhm.
care if somebody is killed in trying to find the truth?
Mhm. So, to answer the first part, I think Mike's belief was very complicated. And I know that he was genuinely interested in a lot of conspiracy theories. He pursued a lot of them to his detriment, not just flat earth. He pursued strange legal theories that briefly landed him in jail. So, he was a committed conspiracy theorist. He was also one of the most visible faces of flat earth for the reason that you mentioned, that he was going to go up
Right,
into the upper atmosphere and prove it. Um, but there was some debate about how committed he was to that and how much he was just dabbling. His publicist said that he was just using flat earth as a publicity stunt. But I talked to other people who've known him much longer, people who were involved in his rocket launches, who spoke to him every day, and they said not only was Mike a flat earther, he was a diehard flat earther. We're not flat earthers. We tried to talk him out of it and we couldn't do it. And I think maybe the best answer I got was from one of his best friends who said, yeah, Mike went into this kind of, curious, not necessarily a flat earther, but his involvement in the movement convinced him. So, um, I don't think belief is always binary. He
right.
could be questioning. And in fact, I think part of his pursuit in this rocket launch was an extended question. He wanted answers. Um, but, to your second question there about why people aren't dissuaded by death. If you embrace a theory like flat earth, which is so all encompassing, it's so sprawling, you're accepting the proposition that the world is not at all as it seems. And for some people
Right.
to get some resolution on that, I think it's extremely compelling. What's being proposed is just so wild that they feel enabled to take wild measures to find out the truth.
Well, you also were talking about this guy, John Braham, who was trying to see what was beyond Antarctica because he felt it was pure energy that would cure everything. But obviously, people who went on this expedition would die. But if you have that carrot out there that no, you won't die because this energy will cure everything, including death, that certainly would be a reason to do that. So I want to ask you, do flat earthers and conspiracy theorists know about this book? Have you heard from them?
Yes, I have. I've had mixed responses. And there's a lot of flat earthers who aren't reading the book and will dismiss it offhand, and I get that. It's not everything is for everyone. I do wish they'd read the book, but I think I care most about the response from people who I describe in the book, because those are the people you know, who actually have insight into the events they're in. And from there, I've got mixed responses. I've had some people say, and I don't think this one guy read the book, but that it makes flat earthers out to be incorrect and it's mean in that respect. And I don't, I'm biased. I don't think it especially does. But I also heard from another flat earther in the book who said, hey, listen, obviously I disagree with you, but this raised some points about the community that, we do need to address in terms
Oh,
of.
okay.
And so that was interesting. And I do respect that feedback. So I don't think conspiracy theorists are going to love the book, but I think if they try and engage with it on good faith, it might be illuminating.
They might also see it as publicity for them. That somebody could read it and say, oh, she's wrong. She's wrong. But so either way, no bad publicity is still publicity. I want to talk more about conspiracy theories. You bring up this really fascinating conflict within these communities where the conspiracy theories themselves seem pushy and aggressive. And
Mhm.
yet these people seem to thrive on I'm sorry, I said these people. People who believe conspiracies seem to feel that they're victims. And I was wondering, do they do that because doesn't everybody want to fight for the underdog and the victim?
Mhm. I think there's an element of that. And it's also true that conspiracy theories often work on almost a team based reality. They have a very us versus them binary where the conspiracy community is a small group of select believers, the only enlightened people, and everybody else on the outside of that community is either willfully blind or actively deceiving them. So, this antagonism that they might get from friends and family who say, you got to stop saying Earth is flat, that in some ways reinforces their belonging to the inside of
Yeah.
this group. Yes.
Yeah, it's really, really strange. It's such an isolating movement, and yet within that isolation, it's like all they have to do is look, and there are people who they think like me, and they act
Mhm.
like me, and they believe like me. So let's talk about how to deal and thwart this. So I want to ask first if people come across flat earthers or they see the table, what's the best way to talk to these people in an honest way? Did you
Mhm.
ever change? And did you ever change anybody's opinion, even a little bit?
I didn't really try to debate flat earthers during the course of reporting this book, and there's two reasons for that. One is that, frankly, I was a journalist reporting on it, and I didn't
Right.
really want to meddle with the subject matter too much. And the other is that time and time again, when I talk to people who've left conspiracy movements or I talk to experts about, say, de radicalization, they say that the things that convince people are not these very factual debates, right? They're not these heated arguments where somebody is going to be proven wrong, because in actuality, what that often does is causes both sides to really just dig their claws into their beliefs. No one wants to be
Right.
wrong, and it becomes more about asserting your identity through this movement and protecting your group. What has appeared to help sometimes is having a more humane discussion with believers, and not just talking about what they believe but the emotional underpinnings of it. Why is it important that you have this community? And was there a community that you lost or that you're looking for? And as people
That's
start to
interesting.
challenge, yeah, as people start to challenge those beliefs, giving them an alternative, making it social inroads, giving them a safe place to land, so to speak. There's one former flat earther I talked to who was he was curious enough that he was in a round earth discussion group and a flat earth discussion group. And when he had doubts, he'd ask the round earthers and they explained very politely. And when he said I'm having doubts, he said, just hang out over here. And that was enough. That helped him.
That's really funny. And it's not it's that seems I can see why that would work because he's not gonna be isolated. He's just gonna be in another group with
Right.
people who are like him, who support him. So I want to talk about the role of the internet because certainly since the internet came on, YouTube is a cesspool of misinformation and doctored videos and it's easy to believe what you see, even if what you see is not true. So, even people say that about news on TV, so they turn to YouTube. Yeah, I read in your book that recently they are cracking down on a lot of that stuff. But and the flat earthers are angry about that, but won't their materials just pop out elsewhere?
They would, I think. And so it's a very difficult conversation to have about exactly how much should be moderated online, how much should be removed, et cetera, and how much will find a new
It's
home if
free
they do remove.
speech.
It is. And, so I think my easy answer to it's a more complicated question is to point to not the existence of this content online, but how these websites prioritize it. So,
Right.
sites like YouTube, they have an algorithm that recommends videos for you, and it recommends videos that it thinks you might want to watch. And surprise, surprise, the things that people want to watch are actually, kind of controversial and they're sensational, and Flat Earth really fits that rubric. So from about 2014 to 2019, YouTube was recommending tons of flat Earth videos, even for people who were watching just tangentially related things like videos about outer space, videos about other conspiracy theories. And that's how these beliefs really got funneled into people's feeds, and people got into this theory without even trying. So after quite a bit of criticism in 2019, YouTube said, okay, we're gonna stop treating flat Earth videos this way. And they changed the algorithm, and now they're a lot harder to accidentally run into. So I think that is step one of what we can do to address these this content online. Is, we can have a more difficult discussion about taking it down. I do think there is sometimes some merit to that, but I think step one is just making sure it doesn't have an unfair advantage. Factual
Right.
information should be
But
prioritized.
But many flat earthers feel that it is to their advantage, that it helps their cause, because it proves to the world that, they want to suppress us. What are they afraid of? And it also sort of, I think it engenders a feeling of power when you have, a big organization saying, no, you cannot speak. Then they can cry censorship, and then they feel like they're pioneers in this. Um, it's a very weird thing in that they want the information out there, and they say it's a win if we get it out there. But if it's
Mhm.
suppressed, some of them say, oh, it's a win too. Um, I'm just wondering, like, what you think, where you think this movement is going to go in the future. Do you see it always continuing, or do you think it's going to dissipate? Do you know the number of people who have left? You don't know the number, but do you know if any people have left the flat earthers in a significant number, or have they gained people?
It's so hard to know firm numbers for flat earthers because they don't always announce it, right? I've been at a flat earth conference with 600 people, and all of them were paying $200-300 to be there. So it's a not insignificant movement. But I know people have left, or people have at the very least sort of backed away from the theory at times. I think it ebbs and flows. And although I don't have, I don't know the exact numbers of participants. What I would say instead, the future is it's becoming more networked with other conspiracy theories. So when I first started following this movement around 2017, I saw that the Facebook groups that you could be in or the conferences you could attend were very narrowly about flat Earth. And these days it's a little different. They will be cross-pollinating with other conspiracy theories. You'll see QAnon stuff in the flat Earth group and
Right.
flat Earth stuff in the QAnon group. So I think maybe the borders are blurring a little bit, and it's becoming a gateway in and out of other conspiracy theories.
Right. That was actually going to be my next question about how these conspiracy theories do intersect. I mean, there are white supremacists, there's a hatred of the Jews, there's Holocaust deniers, people saying Anne Frank's diary was fan fiction. So,
Mhm.
my first question about that is, first of all, why why target a small group like the Jews? Is it because they think that they have so much power? And why would somebody, there's a QAnon, I think it's QAnon, where they believe that Kennedy is, coming to Trump rallies, and nobody seems to take into effect that if he was, he'd be, 104.
Mhm.
So how is this? How do you get the facts to rise up here? And why is it more pleasant not to believe the facts when you have conspiracy theories? Why is that a way to live in the world? Especially when why are people so afraid of science? I'm sorry, that's 6 questions at once.
And
But
they're
why
all
are
good
they?
questions. To your first question, I mentioned before that conspiracy theories often take on an us versus them narrative. And historically, that's been used against minorities. It's been used to scapegoat
Right,
people.
right, right,
So
right. That's true.
for for centuries, there have been really just awful conspiracy theories about Jewish people because they were an easy group to point at.
Right.
And because that has actually been so entrenched in the narrative for so long, that a lot of the structure, the skeleton of conspiracy theories that we recognize today actually have their roots in anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. So that when people are arriving at newer conspiracy theories or trying to, create the bones for one, it's very easy for them to go back and deliberately or even accidentally import these older conspiracy theories that have their roots in hatred. So, that's how I've seen some people who are explicitly bigoted smuggle that bigotry into flat earth. And I've seen some flat earthers who probably weren't consciously anti-Semitic accidentally invoke things. And I say, do
Right.
you know what you're saying there? And, we have that discussion. But it's, I apologize. I'm trying to disentangle that question from the next one.
Sorry,
Um,
I got overexcited. But it's also, a lot of these people, they've never had, I mean, there's certainly a lot of controversy about, or right after 9/11, if you were Muslim, it was terrible. And I remember having a conversation with somebody who was living in the Midwest. And I was telling her, the people who run the bodega down the street are Muslim and we're friends with them and we see them all the time. I said, have you ever met somebody who is Muslim? And the woman said,
mhm.
no, and I don't want to. And I said, but what do you think would happen if you met a Muslim? And she said, I don't want to know. It's sort of that protective ignorance that
Mhm.
really got me. Why wouldn't you want to know? Why wouldn't you
That's
want to know?
That's a good question. And I think in some ways that distance from other people allows a conspiracy theorist to make them an enemy. I was talking before about how having a humane discourse with people can pull them away from conspiracy theories. And I think to that effect, having a personal relationship with somebody can humanize them and can
Right.
make people understand that they're not what this theory makes them out to be. One thing I've been thinking about lately in discussing this book is I also cover a lot of extremism, and there's a lot of debate about how to de-radicalize people who might be in hateful ideologies. And one thing that has been proposed as helpful is introducing people to the communities that they think they hate and
Yes.
making them understand that these people can have feelings like you and they can be victimized by you. And so I think, conspiracy theories like to strip away the nuance of the world and divide things into good and evil. And people just aren't that way. So I think, if a conspiracy theorist doesn't want to know a piece of information, like a piece of scientific evidence, or they don't
Mhm.
want to know a person, that allows them to remain ignorant. But having those human relationships really challenges that narrative.
Julie, do we have any questions? Nobody, no questions yet? Okay, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. Don't be shy. I have two more questions for you. I know you have to leave. You talk about gentle calm downs, easing the transition, and you use the phrase operating in the gray. I
Mhm.
love that. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So this phrase operating in the gray came from a psychologist I spoke to who helps people exit cults. And she said there were some similarities between cultic belief and conspiracy belief. And one thing that she recommends for both of them is not dividing the world into this binary of doubting everything or accepting everything blindly, but leaving room for healthy skepticism and not letting skepticism rule your life. So when I talk about conspiracy theories, I don't say trust everything the government says and never question
Right,
anything. I
right.
think there's room for that, but I also don't make doubt my default belief. I think we fundamentally as a social species need to trust each other and need to have that openness. So when she talks about operating in the gray, it's giving yourself a little bit of permission and a little bit of flex. And I thought that was a really good model for
I
thinking of
think
it.
it is too. I think you're not going to drag somebody immediately over to your side, but maybe you can draw them a little bit closer. So I wanted
Mhm.
to ask you, are you seeing budding new conspiracy theories that we don't know yet?
Yes, I am.
Oh no,
And
what are they?
oh my goodness, it's always I never know how much airtime to give something if it's not already widely out there. What I'll say is that I'm seeing a lot of repositioning of older conspiracy networks to spread misinformation about the war in Ukraine. So these
Oh
networks
no.
that were it's actually very upsetting.
Oh
And
no,
so
that's
right. And so we're seeing older narratives like, oh, I don't know, misinformation about COVID being repurposed for this. So falsely claiming that Ukraine was making COVID and that they were responsible for it. And it's ludicrous. You can trace the origins from that conspiracy theory back, to 24 months ago when you were hearing about other countries. But I would say there's a lot of recycling of conspiracy theories right now and seeing how they can be leveraged in this new crisis.
that's horrible.
Yeah.
It's just completely horrible. I want to tell everybody again to please go to bookshop.org or walk to your favorite indie bookstore and support them. And this book, Off the Edge, whoops, let me get it onto the camera. It's completely fascinating and thought provoking. Oh, we have one last question from Tom. Have you encountered any conspiracy theorists that can engage in discussion based in critical thinking? Or is that automatically rejected or considered confrontational to them? Good question.
It's a good question. I think there is a degree to which that's possible, definitely. Conspiracy theories aren't powerful because they offer the most logical explanation. They're powerful because they appeal to people's emotions. But, conspiracy theorists aren't dumb. They are evaluating information, and I've met a couple who are a bit more open. And one thing that's actually been interesting is meeting conspiracy theorists who then have conspiracy theories made about them, and they have been able to pull apart the language used there and say, "Hang on, these people are making it up." And what I hope is that they can then pivot from that realization to deconstructing their own conspiracy beliefs.
So, can you sum up for our readers, like what our listeners, what they can, what they should know about conspiracy theorists and flat Earth? Just like 3 points.
Sure. I would say that conspiracy theories aren't as weird as you think, that they are part of a thought process that a lot of people are engaged in. But that said, flat Earth is one of the stranger ones, and it allows people to reject science wholesale. And even though it's completely out there, there are possibilities to bring people back from this belief. And often they're difficult conversations, but with enough humanity, I think there's hopefully more of a chance.
Thank you so, so much. We didn't even talk about Trump and conspiracy theories. I think people are tired of those.
I,
Let me
yeah.
show this gorgeous cover again, Off the Edge. Kelly Weill. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. Thank all of you for being here. Thank all of you for listening. You can still post in the chat. This interview will live online on our YouTube station and on Facebook, and it's one of the best interviews I think that I've listened to myself. Kelly, you're just fascinating. Thank you so much for being here. Thank everybody for being here, and we'll see you all next time. Good
Thank
afternoon.
you.